Hello and welcome to this special fireside chat with Dr. Raghuram Rajan, the Governor of the Reserve Bank of India. I say fireside chat only because he's sitting by a country whose economy, especially its inflation rate, is on fire. So not the typical fireside chat. Many have described the decision to make Dr. Rajan the RBI governor as the best decision this government has made in the last 5 years. Frankly, that's not saying much, and I don't think he'd be very happy with it. It reminds me of a time when we used to do The World This Week, and people used to tell us, it was a show on Doordarshan, they used to say, it's the best thing on Doordarshan. And then they'd add, but Doordarshan ain't too good, is it? So it's a kind of backhanded compliment. But if you ask me, and if you read the reviews, I think by global standards, it was a brilliant decision. Some of the reviews, in fact, that I've read about the appointment as RBI governor of Dr. Rajan said that, oh God, I wish he had been made the chairman of the US Federal Reserve. I wonder which he would have preferred given the situation right now. But overall, I'll just start with one anecdote about Dr. Rajan. 3 years before the crash of 2008-2009, he made a speech at a very public, important gathering. And he warned the world that a financial crisis was about to happen. And the great economists, Larry Summers, and many others, said he was not right. In fact, Larry Summers called him a Luddite. Pretty strong words. But in the end, Larry Summers was wrong. Dr. Rajan was right. And if they had listened to him and done something, some of the pain could have been avoided. But now they do listen to Dr. Rajan. That's a true story, right? He did call you a Luddite.
Well, yeah. He did call me a Luddite. And it was because he thought I was saying, let's do away with modern finance, let's go back to the boring banks. And so he thought I was going to reverse progress and suggested that...
But he didn't listen to the underlying... You didn't want to go back.
Well, yes, I didn't want to go back, but I wanted to make better what... I wanted to curb the risk-taking, which I thought was excessive. We needed to control risk in the modern financial system. And I in no way was advocating a return to boring monopolistic banks.
Of course not, yeah.
However, I mean, to some extent, even then I sympathized with where he was coming from, which is that, regulators all the time are faced with loonies saying the world is coming to an end, watch this or watch that. Yeah. And even today people will say there are housing booms, there are, prices are going through the roof, there's a bubble in India. But
that's being very modest on your part, because there were not too many who so accurately and specifically pointed to the financial crisis and why it was going to happen. So if you saw Larry Summers right now sitting here, what would you say to him?
No, Larry and I have talked about it.
What did he say?
He's been very, very
contrite.
Look, he recognizes that perhaps a lot of people, including him, were oversold on the benefits.
Larry Summers recognizes he might have been wrong?
I think a lot of people thought that the markets would take care of themselves, that people in markets were responsible adults and that they had the right incentives. They were right about the responsible adults. They were right about these are the smartest guys on the planet. Where they were wrong is that these guys had the right incentives. And I think that they've recognized, and I think they'll try to make sure it doesn't happen.
You know the story about the Queen of England going to
Yes.
LSE and looking at all these great economists and said, why couldn't one of you forecast that what was this crisis that is surrounding us? And everybody looked a little sheepish. Now you could have stood there and said, talk to me.
Yes and no. I mean,
you're being too modest.
No, I'm not being modest. Look, a lot of dealing with a crisis is also about predicting the timing.
Right.
You can see the forces
at work.
Close. Yeah, but Bob Shiller, for example, was predicting a housing crash. He just won the Nobel Prize for all his work. But There were others, but the key, of course, is to get it right, get the timing right. And you can see the forces. I mean, in any place you can see the forces, but...
Well, I'm going to come to what you're seeing for India. I'd just like to divide this chat into two parts. First part, what's the problem? Second part, what's the solution? And there is a third part which he doesn't even know about, the surprise part. But so the problem. Let's just take a look at India's inflation. Basically, for 28 years, our inflation rate was way below 5 years. We are right about 130th, 140th. We're in the bottom quartile. Our inflation rate is way higher than most emerging markets, most significant emerging markets. What went wrong?
Well, I think if you had to pick one source of our inflation, it would be food. And the question is, why have food prices skyrocketed? But I think focusing only on food would be problematic, because it's not just food. Food is part of it, but services have been increasing at high rates also, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's housing services. So we do have an inflation problem, and it comes partly because our population is demanding more food, more services, and of course part of the answer is we haven't been able to supply it at the rate that the demand has been increasing. And the key issue is, why are we not able to supply it at that same rate? And of course there we come into a variety of constraints on production that we have to alleviate.
A lot of people say that, and I've studied this as well, the terms of trade went against agriculture for about 20 years, right up to 5 years ago. And it was time for the terms of trade to go back to favor the farmer. He's suffered for 20 years. And if you talk to many farmers now, they're very happy.
Absolutely.
Prices have gone up, their land values have gone up, they're making money, their kids are going to school for the first time. So this worry about food inflation is an urban phenomenon to some extent, because farmers, a lot of them have gained from that, haven't they?
No, absolutely. So I'm not saying in any way. Clearly there's been a change in terms of trade, to some extent pushed by the government in terms of minimum support prices increasing. But it's also spread, I mean, the inflation from all that has spread beyond food to wages. Remember, many of our workers are at subsistence levels. Right. When food prices increase, their wages increase. But wages at the bottom then pushes wages up elsewhere. So across the board, you've seen wage inflation, for example, in rural areas, till recently was growing at a very high rate. And that feeds into every other service. I mean, where does construction labor come from? From the rural areas. Right. So it's fed through the economy. Now, clearly, people have benefited. But equally clearly, inflationary expectations are high now. And if in the long run we think the poorest of the poor are affected by high inflation, but also decision making becomes more difficult, your savings, you're not willing to save in financial assets because it gets eroded. Yeah. All those reasons suggest we need to bring inflation down. Right. And that means we have to take a tough stance.
So you must have read the advice to you that be a Paul Volcker. Go and smash inflation, smash inflationary expectations. Doesn't matter if you go into a recession, because in the end you'll have the foundation to have a great rebound. So are you a Paul Volcker Indian version?
No, I think people have fairly dramatic views of what needs to be done. You have to be careful. Can we afford 18% interest rates today? And the answer is we have a weak economy. Yes. We have a weak corporate sector. Some of it is highly levered. And you have to be mindful of all that the patient may not survive the medicine. Right. So you have to be careful that your rate of disinflation matches the health of the economy. So we are taking measured steps. Of course, there is a point at which you have to act more aggressively. At this point, we think we are as aggressive as we need be, given our estimates of already the weak economy and the fact that causes prices to weaken, and that's in the right direction. So we think interest rates are about where they should be, But we'll monitor the economy carefully. The message we want to send is we will be vigilant. And we are trying to bring this inflationary, high inflationary period to an end.
Is there a, I know it's difficult for you to answer this, is there a mandate from the overall government saying elections are coming up in 6 months, or 200 days, or 198 days now, do anything, but do not ignore inflation? Is there a mandate overall because of elections?
No, I think that there's no mandate because of elections. I think the general sense in government and in the Reserve Bank is we have two goals. We have to ensure relatively low inflation because that hurts everybody, but also
except the farmers. They may be
right now, not the farmers, but remember, minimum support prices have been raised only by a fraction of the rate at which they were raised in the past. Right. And so at some point, it will stabilize and they will start getting hurt by inflation. Already, as I said, rural wages are not growing any faster than inflation and maybe coming down even more. Inflation is going to start hurting in real terms, even in rural areas, if we don't bring it down.
So you're not Paul Volcker, but you're an inflation hawk. That you've denied, right?
These terms get bandied around. I mean, the truth is, the best way we can support growth at the Reserve Bank are really two. One, which is consistent with central banks everywhere, bring down inflation to a level where the ordinary person doesn't have to worry about it every day, and decisions can be made about investment, about savings, without these kinds of problems. I mean, take one problem inflation is causing. Manufactured goods, they're not seeing high inflation.
No. The manufactured goods are 2%, 3%.
Exactly. So for them, if I set the interest rate at 10%, they're seeing a huge interest rate. They're saying this is killing us. Yeah. On the other hand, if you look at the saver, he's saying 10% is not enough. You're inflating away because I have to pay for my consumption goods at 11, 12% a year. The point here is...
He just goes into assets or gold or something.
Exactly. And so savings rates in the country fall. Net effect, we go borrow from outside to finance our investment. The point is that inflation is hurting us, creating distortions. We need to bring it down so the manufacturer sees the same inflation rate as the consumer, and that interest rate brings them together. That is why...
Actually, there's huge disparity. I think if you look at the CPI right now, the inflation rate overall is 9.8, 10%.
9.8, yeah.
And, but manufacturing is about 2%.
Exactly, 2.1.
But food is 18%.
Exactly.
So that's such a different, I mean, inflation, you've got a real tricky problem.
Right, the variability starts killing
sectors,
you. Exactly.
Not only over time, but cross-sectionally is
now, some of the variability is good because it takes resources towards the areas which are high inflation. If you look at the elements of food which have been increasing in price in the past, you're seeing resources move towards that, more production being created. For example, poultry, for example, milk. There has been more production, and some of those inflation rates have stabilized. But you want to do it in a better way than massive rates of inflation causing.
And it's not a planned distribution or redistribution of your product.
Exactly.
But one thing which I don't believe in, but I just would love to know your views. The general belief in India is that food prices, inflation in food is caused by hoarders. Mm. Do you believe that?
I mean, some element of timing there could be. I have onions. I'd rather, if I think the price is going up, I hold it from the market. But, as a general explanation, I don't think it works. I think at particular points in time, and of course, what happens is, once prices go up, then you have people planting more, onions and this and that. As you know from your days in the, well, I shouldn't say days as an economist. You're an economist, and you know that there's a hog cycle. You see prices going up, suddenly you create more hogs,
Right.
and suddenly there's a glut of hogs.
Exactly.
So I don't think speculation, hoarding, I think certain periods, certain points in time, maybe there's certain cause to believe that.
But it's not a
But it's not a general
it's
explanation
like a
for
bit of an
inflation.
excuse.
Yes.
But there is the worry that in this kind of skewed situation where manufacturing is 2% and food is 18%, what role can the RBI do to control 18% inflation in food, particularly say onions? What can you do? That's another area.
Yeah.
Just import or increase supply or you know.
We can't control onion prices.
You can't.
Not in the short run.
Yeah.
In the longer run, I think what we have to do is bring down people's expectations of inflation, and then give the onion farmer less incentive to raise onion prices when he's selling it on the market. Reduce his cost increases so that he feels comfortable selling it at a lower price. I mean, the point is that inflation gets embedded, and to start reversing it is a hard process, but it is a necessary process, and for that there is some amount of pain which has to be experienced by the economy. Disinflation is not necessarily pain-free. I'm hoping that the slow growth we have already is part of the pain we are incurring in order to get the disinflationary process working, and there's only a limited amount of pain we need in addition.
But you don't want to step on the brake so hard that the passengers fly through the windscreen.
Absolutely.
So that's
Absolutely.
the key point of how you do it.
I mean, we are a poor economy. You don't want to step so hard that you have business failures, you have people, massive unemployment. That would be problematic in its own right. So it's a measured process, and I'm hopeful that with the bountiful harvest we will get some benefit.
Great to have a good monsoon this year.
It comes at the right time.
Just spot on. I mean, when inflation is at the highest, a big monsoon, a good monsoon. One issue, just like your views on, every country in the world, let's have a look at, has declared a target inflation rate. This is what we are comfortable with, that or below. For example, Brazil says 4.5, China says 3.5% inflation, Indonesia 4.5, and Turkey 5. But India stands out as, we don't know what our target is, where we say, look, this is what we're targeting, and let the world know this is what we're targeting, and we'll try and achieve that. What would your target? I know that the indices in India are not quite right yet. The wholesale price index has got problem, no services in it. CPI is still to be refined, and I think you're doing quite a lot of work on both these indices. But with a proper index, what would be your target inflation rate?
Well, I think with the wholesale price index, we would say 5%.
5%.
It's a little higher than some other countries, but we're early days in terms of sticking and hitting the target and sticking to it. So
that's not bad for a growing economy.
Absolutely, and for a poor economy where the processes are less well established. As far as the CPI goes, we have to get more comfortable with the series, what it really means, how it moves over time, before we can, put a target in stone.
I have one request. When I was with the government for the short period, I worked on deseasonalizing all our indices, because India is much more seasonal than other countries because of the monsoon, harvests, etc. Can't we deseasonalize this? Year on year is a very inaccurate figure. It doesn't tell you the latest inflation pressures.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. The key, of course, is trying to explain it to the public. Because the public has got...
publish only deseasonalized. That's what everybody does. This is the inflation rate. You don't go 1 year ago, it was,
Right. But that goes to my first point. We need to understand the dynamics of this CPI inflation better so we can deseasonalize in a better way. Right. But you're right, we should be looking at the momentum of inflation rather than what happened last year, where are we this year.
It doesn't tell you latest movements, actually.
Absolutely.
Before I just get on to industry, who's facing a tough time right now, I just want to ask you, I loved your analogy about cricket and that we get too euphoric when we do well and we get too critical when Dhoni has been through it. Now you're the new Dhoni of the financial sector. But I have one difference with that analogy, and that is globally, there is a bit of pessimism about India.
Yeah.
Now, wherever you travel, the negative feedback on India, falling off the map a bit, the India-China is not talked about so much. What went wrong with that wonderful India story? What went wrong?
We slowed down.
Why did we
we slowed down partly because we came up against the constraints to our growth which we hadn't fixed, which in years of strong growth, our institutional structures should have been also worked on. And to some extent, we came to realize that these were problems.
Give me some example, two
allocating
examples.
resources.
Right.
When coal was plentiful, we didn't need coal mines.
Right.
And then we started growing. We started having power, building power plants, needing more coal. And we came to the limits of what coal India could produce. Right. We needed private allocation. Right. We didn't have a system to allocate privately. And then you have Colgate.
Right. But that slows down the whole...
That slows down the whole process. Even further, spectrum allocation, we have had problems with that. But allocation of...
What about things like, which depressed most of the world, the retrospective tax, these kind of errors?
Well, some of those, in hindsight, I think were definitely avoidable. But, let's take the Vodafone case. Yes, retrospective tax. We can talk about the semantics of retrospective tax and so on. But the key, however, is the story doesn't get out that they're, in a sense, yet to be taxed.
Right, yes.
That it's still unsettled. They have been talking for so much time, and some compromise will eventually arise. But more important, that despite this, they're putting more money into India and buying back all the equity that's outstanding, suggesting that they think there's money to be made. And this is the story that doesn't get out.
Yes.
That the foreign corporations in India, the ones who have learned to work with the system, are making money. Hindustan Lever bought back or tried to buy back a significant chunk of its equity. People are seeing there's money to be made, and this is different from the FDI experience in some other countries. So my point is, it's not just us. Because we're an open society, because we talk about it all the time.
And because of the media.
No, but your job is not to tell feel-good stories all the time. Your job is to point out problems. And then we have foreign correspondents who are here, who see the media, who read the papers, who do a little bit of poking around. And, what sells now? It's the bad stuff. It's, we feared India as a competitor, as Chindia, we are, close to China. But, it's not all it's cut out to be. The Nandan Nilekani quote, what Cornell as a safety school, that scared a lot of people. Yes. I had people, billionaires in the US saying, will my son actually have a living? Where's your son? Stanford, Harvard. That was the level of fear that India inspired. And there's a little bit of comeuppance now. Oh yes, they're not such tough guys. And there's relief. And therefore there's a little bit also of focus on how bad are these guys really, which was ignored when, at that time we should have
pushed that a bit because it helps the West as well.
There's a little bit of that. Now,
although I must say there was quite a few people who did feel that democracy with a high growth rate was great to see.
I think that is the India story.
Yeah.
I think when we get over this, and I'm saying when, not if, when we get over this period of slow growth, when we get back to stronger growth, and when our people when the country is a middle-income country, the one difference from other countries, Asian countries, large countries that have grown, is that we will have grown with democracy.
Which is a wonderful,
gives
you a wonderful feeling.
Absolutely. That there is a message to send to the rest of the world that it can be done.
Yeah.
And it can.
So in some sense, and this is oversimplifying what you're saying that there were really institutional, systemic problems that we had and probably still have that prevented us from continuing on a high growth rate. A bit like your speech in 2005, 2006, where you said there are systemic problems which will cause a financial crisis. So similarly here, there are systemic problems like allocation of resources which we have to solve.
Absolutely. We have to. And to some extent our democracy is both pointing out the problems as well as, pushing institutions to try and solve them.
Do you feel, to be really positive in a way of thinking, that this whole process is a catharsis, is a cleansing process? We are finding things that used to be under the carpet before, and we demand that they be fixed.
Of course it is. It is clearly that process. The danger that we have to be wary of is that we get convinced ourselves that finding all these problems, that we are a no good society, that no good economy, nothing can happen, and we get into a funk. And this is where, we need a rebuilding of the animal spirits, that we can do it. Fix the problems and move ahead. And this is why one of the important things I wanted to say is, let's not mistake our longer term issues, which we need to solve, for the short term problems which are easier to solve. So longer term, we need better infrastructure, we need better education, we need much more reasonable regulation, and we need a stronger financial system. But these are 5 to 10 year issues that we need to solve. Short run, it was implementation. It is, let's get a clear, transparent system for allocating coal mines. Let us get a decent system for allocating spectrum. And we're in the process of solving them. So my sense is that when people from the West look, these guys don't have manufacturing, that's really why they're in the dumps. No, that's not why we're in the dumps. We are slowing down because we expanded too fast, and we
Systems
have these.
Were the old
systems.
So in a way, what you're saying is that with these old systems, if they remain in place, our growth rate is going to be capped at 4 to 5%. If we change the system, we can go back to our 9 to 10% on a long-term basis.
I'd say 7 to 8 is what is feasible. These are all numbers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, but I think we could get back to a decent, remember 8% was what we grew at from 2002 to 2012 on average. We can get back to that if we fix the allocation processes and there's confidence in them.
And that's not so tough to fix.
It's not that difficult. Now, I do think we can go to 12. But for that, we need to fix the other 4 problems: infrastructure, human capital, regulation, and finance.
Right. And those are slightly longer, but 7 to 8 to 9% by these quick fixes, not difficult fixes, is doable.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I do want to come to industry because, man, you're not the most popular cricket captain with them.
Well,
they've got a triple squeeze.
Yes.
Their prices are not going up. It's about 2%. Their interest rates are 10%, whatever, more than that. And anybody who's importing stuff, that's gone up by 15, 16%. Yep. So their costs are going up, their output prices are not going up. Any words to industrialists to say there is the end of the tunnel in sight, or are you going to just...
No, I'm hoping that growth starts picking up for reasons other than what we're doing.
Right. Like the monsoon.
Like the monsoon, like the exports, like the unstalling, if you will, that's a bad word, for what the CCI, Cabinet Committee on Investment, is doing. Large projects coming on stream will be very helpful. I also think that some of what we are doing on the financial sector reforms will help establish growth over the short to medium term, probably more medium term than short term. But the message I think industry has to hear is that if we don't fix inflation now, the problem will get worse. And that squeeze they're talking about, their prices, which are determined by global competition, global trade, will stay relatively fixed. Their costs are going to go through the roof because they're paying for services, they're paying for inputs, they're paying wages. So they're going to get squeezed more unless we tackle inflation. And so I would say, bear with us. We have to do this in your interest.
But it's a short-term bitter medicine, and industry has to live with it for a while.
I think they have to, and I think they have to see it as part of the longer-term solution, the medium-term solution.
To you as an economist, in the long run, we're all dead. So I don't know how long is long.
No, we'll be alive over the next few years when hopefully inflation will have come down and they can celebrate. I
do want to go to the how our growth went slip sliding away. You wouldn't know that from
Yeah,
Simon and
no,
Garfunkel.
I know that.
Don't
Yeah.
back.
I'm your generation.
So like for 10 years, we were growing at 8, 7, 8, 9, 6, 7, 8, 9%. And then 2009, suddenly we just started going down, right down to now 4 to 5%. Why did that happen? In that sharp 2009?
There's an interlude. 2007, 8,
Yes, was the
global crisis, we went down.
Yeah.
Actually, 8, 9 is the year we went down.
Right.
And then 9, 10, 10, 11, we picked up very rapidly.
That's true, yes.
2 years of very strong growth. And that's where I think part of the problem arose, that we did 3 stimulus packages on the fiscal side, monetary, we cut interest rates very sharply. Again, because people were saying growth is so slow, and at that point we ignored the fact CPI inflation was already high even during the crisis. And I think to some extent, those stimulus packages, in hindsight, of course, hindsight is 2020, were too much.
Right.
And we started having high rates of inflation, excessively high rates of growth, and put on that the sort of problem of these allocations, which comes back to hit us at that point, and put one more set of issues on that, which is we become more conscious about development and its effects on the environment. We become conscious of its effects on our tribal population, and we start trying to put in safeguards, the Forest Act, the environment protection laws that we start implementing. All these come together in sort of a perfect storm.
In the perfect storm.
Over time, we will learn how to protect the environment, but not have infinite delays in permissions while protecting it.
Yeah, this infinite delays that every project seems to go through, that has to end. Otherwise, we are back to a 4 to 5% cap rate, the new Hindu rate of growth.
Absolutely, and I think we have a short-term fix, which is coordination at the very top, saying we got to clear these projects. That's the Cabinet Committee on Investment and its supporting secretariat. But longer term, that cannot be a permanent fix. We have to create the structures within the ministries that are willing to speed up these decisions.
So get rid of these systemic problems, allocation problems. Don't go in for too much artificial boosting of the economy, and you have a new 9 to 10%. Or in the long run, 9 to 10.
7 to 8, then you need to do the other stuff to get to the 9 to 10.
7 to 8 is not bad. I can live with that for a while.
It's great.
I want to come to the rupee. Again, for a long while it was pretty stable at 45, 50, between that. Then it went into this free fall suddenly from 50 to 65. Then you came in and it went back to about 61, 62. I mean, the world really lauded the measures you took and felt confidence in it. But two questions. One, what led to that free fall in such a short time? And is that free fall over? Are we stable now?
Well, first, as a central banker, you should never say never.
No,
So the moment I say yes, and you cannot display any complacency. You have to be wary of what could happen. So I won't say that we're immune from it. I will say we are much better prepared to avoid such an event. I think what was happening is there's a little bit of panic setting in. On the one hand, the government and the RBI were taking a number of decisions to try and prevent the panic. But on the other hand, given the pace at which decisions were being made, given that investors across the globe weren't fully aware of why we were doing it, suddenly people started thinking maybe there's more to this than we thought.
It was like, if they're working so hard at trying to fix it, there must be something broken.
I think there was a little bit of that. And the ill-informed started saying, okay, sell India. And a lot of investors tell me, longer-term investors tell me they were getting calls, from head office saying, why are you still in India? Haven't you read the newspaper? It says that there are a basket case on this, that, everything. And my sort of concern was, how can a country with 280 billion in reserves, with external debt of about 22% of GDP, how come we get so close to the edge? Because we can pay back all our short-term debt with our reserves tomorrow. And
twice, I think.
More than that. But the issue is, why did we come to such an edge? And I think it was really the build-up of all this. And to some
extent, to use the phrase Chinese whispers going around.
Absolutely, there's a certain amount of that, and in a sense, the solution to that was to change the conversation a little bit, which was part of what we were trying to do.
Are you? I know it's tough for you to say this. Are you comfortable with 60, 61, 62 rupees?
Well, I think the right way to say it is we don't know what the level will settle at. What we do need to do, and before we are comfortable that the market has reached an equilibrium, is remember we took the oil demand off the market. We're giving the oil companies dollars directly.
Yeah.
We need to get them back onto the market to purchase dollars. Similarly, we've sort of diverted all the FCNR, the NRI deposits directly into our treasury. We're taking the dollars directly.
So you're saying some measures will have to, I'm just saying for the viewers, those may be a bit temporary.
Yeah, we have to bring all those measures to an end. As they get back onto the market, then we'll have a market which is fully where there's full participation. Right. Now, typically, markets are supposed to anticipate all this. So, is the market equilibrium much different from 61 and change, which we are? I wouldn't think so. But I don't know until I get it all back.
But you feel not uncomfortable with 61, 62? You don't feel?
I'm not uncomfortable with where it is.
And a lot of exporters would like to hear that you don't want it to go back to 45.
I don't want it to go back to 45. I would agree with that. I don't want it to go back to 45.
Just talking quickly about the forex reserves. I know we are nearly 300 billion, but compared to other countries, it's still not that secure. Like Brazil has got 12 times its short-term debt in terms of foreign exchange reserves. Mexico 7 times, China 6 times, Russia 6 times. India about 2. You say a little more than 2 in your estimate.
No, it depends on how you count. Yeah. If you count original maturity, it's about 4. No, it's about 3. And if you count residual, I know this jargon. Let's say 2 is fine. 2 is fine.
2. That's only above, say, South Africa, 1.5, and Turkey, which is 1. So it's not very comfortable, but 2 times is better than we've been for many.
Yeah, and there is a legitimate question about whether we should bolster reserves when the time comes. And of course, we'll address that question when, as I said, before we get to that question, we first have to bring the market back into its full form.
How close are we, or is this again just Chinese whispers, to a downgrade and to junk status?
I don't think anybody who takes a sensible view of India, I mean, come on, it's a country growing at 5%. Maybe some people will dispute that and say 4.5, but 4.5 is still 4.5.
Not bad, yeah.
But if you think about our sovereign debt, it's all rupee denominated for the most part, and our debt to GDP is about 65%. Compare that with the US 100, Japan 220. I mean, even amongst many emerging markets, we're not that far out of line. And the most important thing is it's long maturity debt, 9.5 years to 10 years. It's rupee denominated, and it's been coming down. So are we going to have a sovereign default?
No question.
No question.
Yeah. I think that's very important. Just coming really to the end, when you talked about we reacted so many policies, people are going to say, my God, this is something worse than we think because India is overreacting. One of the things which kind of got very bad press was little tinkering, tampering, which reminded you of the old days. Instead of $200,000, $75,000, don't buy property. This just didn't affect much. You've said that's temporary. And how long term is temporary?
Well, we'll have to let the markets come back. I see that as part of policy, that, as we are still a developing country, when times are good and the money is pouring in out of our ears, let's let it out, because we don't want to absorb it.
Right.
That would cause us to appreciate too much. Let's let it out. Yeah. When the money is scarce, let's put some constraints. Now, if you locked into some contract to buy something or to pay for some program your children are in, we should allow flexibility where you have the right to do that.
Just like it was a bad signal, maybe releasing a small thing like that is a good signal?
Yeah, I think that would be right, but let's get comfortable. And but what people don't appreciate is one of the factors that that lead to decisions like that is equity. And let me explain. You're telling rural India, you're telling poor Indians that your major source of investment, gold, is not appropriate. We don't want you to invest in gold, so we're going to shut down gold imports. But at the same time, this rich family, which is going to take out 300,000 per person per year, 1.2 million, how many families can afford that? We're going to not cut that at all.
Of signals,
yes.
But in terms of absolute amount, gold and this, the differences are like a millionfold.
Yeah, yeah. So
it's a signal.
It is a signal, and it's got a fair amount of political value, but it's also, I think, there was a possibility. And remember, we are in a situation where trying to close all doors to send the signal that we have the situation under control. And to be fair to the government and the RBI at that time, you should accept that what now the market has come to accept was what the government was saying then, that we've got the current account deficit under control. It is going to be 70 billion, not more. In fact, now market analysts are saying it's going to be much less. But that was a message that finally, I think, also helped turn the tide.
I think I have to differ with you on that, because it reminds me of days when we used to try and send a signal that matches we are going to increase the excise duty in the budget, and we are going to, in the carbon blackened tires, we are going to increase that. So this is what we are doing. It's like tinkering and tampering. This smacked of that.
No. So tinkering and tampering, there was a little bit of tinkering. I'm not talking about this as being central to that. I'm talking about the range of measures that were taken, including the clampdown on gold, which is, if you will agree, a fairly, I would say, a fairly interventionist policy, because tariff rates have been increased and there are also effectively quantitative restrictions. But it was necessary at that time. And again, the idea is that this will not be a permanent solution.
Well, all I can say is you're a very tolerant man, because coming from a University of Chicago background, how do you take all this? You've got to be flexible, I guess. I mean, how do you get rid of that?
Look, you have a larger goal in mind, and you try and say, that's where I want to go. In the middle, I'm willing to do a little bit of a detour. But we need to get there.
Not too much of a detour.
Not too much. And you recognize that markets sometimes do panic. Sometimes markets are somewhat irrational. And therefore, at times like that, you need to take certain actions which, in the normal course, you would be reluctant to take.
In retrospect, you might look bad, but you do your best at the time.
Absolutely. I mean, look at what the U.S. did, right? The U.S. intervened in bailing out their banks. And where's the free market there? But you're saying, am I better off with a banking system that exists?
This is Chicago talking now.
And a bailout. No. I have friends in Chicago, Gene Farmer, who just won the Nobel Prize, who was entirely against the bailout.
Yeah.
Entirely.
I thought you were just against it right now when you were talking, no?
No, I'm saying that, if they could have been harsher on the bankers. Right. But bailing out the banking system was the right thing to do, because recreating a banking system from once it's collapsed is going to take you 20 years. Do you want to be in the doldrums for 20 years? I think the answer is no.
Finally, rock star, Superman, I mean, you could get a role in Bollywood anytime.
Boring central banker. Why did you say that?
I heard you say that. Yeah. But do you hate it, love it, ignore it?
No, it's, look, I try and ignore it, because I think, mood changes. If things don't go as well, I'm fairly sure I will get my dose of...
one. I'll call you the new Dhoni of the economy.
Yes, and Dhoni just got his house stoned, right? Oh. No, but seriously, I do think that we should look beyond these sobriquets or epithets or whatever you will, and look to what you're really trying to do. I do want to send a message that we are trying to change, and we have a program, and we will try and follow that program. And it's more than just about inflation. It is about changing the financial system. And we'll do what we can.
That's the key part of what you've been saying. It's a constraint to growth.
Exactly. And we need to make it an enabler of growth. So let's see.
And you're a young man who doesn't have these kind of problems, but what fears keep you awake at night? You sleep like a baby.
No, I have to tell you, sleep was hard to come by when the rupee was plummeting, because you're trying to say, this is part of the frenzy of activity. What more can we do? Because it's not stabilizing. But I would say that, you worry, and this is the point I made earlier about cranks. There is some crank who's telling me this is going wrong and I'm not listening to that crank. Right. And I should be listening. Now,
like
who is that crank?
In
exactly. Now, who is that crank?
Which is the right one?
And who is the right one? Because I get 5 letters every day on my table saying, you should watch for this particular problem. And which one do I read carefully and take note of?
I'm thrilled to know that you are still absorbing and listening, and I'm sure with your experience you'll choose the right crank.
Thank you very much.